Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. I'm Corey. I'm with Book Soup, and today I have the pleasure of hosting Elizabeth Day to discuss her new book, Magpie, with Samantha Irby. Before we get started, there's a button at the bottom of your screen called Purchase Magpie here. If you've yet to purchase the book, you can do so at any time during the event by pressing that button. Also, if you have a question, please put that in the Ask a Question tab, also at the bottom of your screen. Can we introduce the guests? Samantha Irby is an author. You can find her writing on the internet. Best to read is her blog, Bitches Gotta Eat. Yeah. Elizabeth Day is an award-winning author and broadcaster based in the UK. Her chart-topping podcast, How to Fail, is a celebration of the things that haven't gone right. Elizabeth is also the author of the novel The Party, which was published in the US in 2017. She has 4 other books under her belt as well. These women are beautiful and awesome and writers of the world, and you must listen today. And here we are.
Oh,
that's such a nice intro.
Well, can I just interject? Sorry.
Yes, please.
To say
please speak with that beautiful British accent way more than I speak with my nasal Midwestern American one. Please.
You know I love your voice. I just wanted to interject to say that your writing can also be found in loads of incredible essay collections, including my personal favorite, Wow, No, Thank You. And I am so honored that someone I respect and admire and am entertained by to such a high level has agreed to speak to me. So thank you so much, Samantha. You are a heavenly vision.
Elizabeth, where I come from, that is a marriage proposal. So my answer is I do.
Excellent.
I am obsessed with you. So of course, I'll do anything you ever want me to do. Okay, I wrote questions. I want people to ask questions. You can ask us literally anything, like what brand of tampons do you buy, or whatever you want to know. And then I have some emphasis on loosely structured questions for you, and then we'll get into some shit. Okay, my first question: 4 books and an award-winning podcast. How do you do all of these things? And I truly mean how. Like, how do you divvy up your day? How do you decide when you're writing a book? I want to know all of it.
Okay. I think I'll do the philosophical answer first, and then I'll go into get the practical nitty-gritty. I think the philosophical answer is that I've realized during the pandemic that I'm a workaholic and that I genuinely exist in a state of denial with that addiction. And whenever I feel that life is out of control, which happens quite often, I throw myself into work as an illusory panacea. So my high levels of productivity actually bespeak a fundamental hole where my self-worth should be. I try to just more work. And also the other thing is that on a more serious note, like, I don't have children, and that has been, we're getting very deep straight away. That's been a yearning.
I'm into it.
That's been a yearning for me for many years. And I think also work has been a really amazing emotional crutch for me through what has been a prolonged fertility journey. So there's an aspect of me which is like very much I identify with my work, and I don't know who I would be were I not creating. And a large portion of that is writing, and a large portion of that has become the podcast How to Fail, which is just also, it helped me to meet you. You were a former guest. I get to speak to people about failure, what it meant to them, how they coped with it, what it's taught them.
I love that you're like, my podcast is about failure, and I got to talk to you.
You were my dream guest. No, you were amazing.
I have failed a lot.
Yeah. So I actually think I now realize that all aspects of what I do dovetail together, in that creativity is in and of itself a process of failure and coming to terms with it and keeping on trying, even though you might fail, because you're trying to make something better the next time. And so that's how it all joins together. And how I do it on a practical level is that I think I have separate physical spaces that I go to do the different aspects of it. So I record my podcast from home, but when I go and write fiction, I like to go and write in a coffee shop, what we would call a cafe in London, but what I understand in the States is called a coffee shop. And I tend to like one of those like chain coffee shops where you get free Wi-Fi and no one's going to bother you if you're just there for 2 hours tearing your hair out as you try and labor over this paragraph. And my favorite place to go in LA to write, I love writing in LA because I can get a tan while I do it, is the patio of Coffee Bean on Hillhurst in Los Feliz.
Okay.
Because
no, I love that.
I love it. And they do amazing jasmine tea. All of life is there. I've spent, our introducer was kind enough to mention my previous novel, The Party. That was largely written in the Coffee Bean patio, and big chunks of Magpie were written there too. So I think having a separate physical space really helps me, because I don't have any sense of like, I don't ring fence particular days to do particular things. I just try and fit it in when and where I can.
I can't believe you can write in a coffee shop. I'm so fucking nosy. Number one, so I'm like, who's here? But I think that comes from like a self-consciousness of like, are people wondering if I'm actually working? You know, I can never relax and work because I'm like, do I look pretentious as I'm pretending to work? I could never shut my brain off enough to write more than a sentence even with someone else in the room, let alone in a busy place full of like beautiful people. I would just be like, what are they drinking? What's she getting? What's he getting?
Well, that's why I don't really go to the places with the beautiful people. I totally agree with you, because I want to go to places.
There's somebody watching right now who goes to that Coffee Bean who's like, man, fuck you. I'm gorgeous.
They're all gorgeous in a different way. They're not like self-consciously beautiful people. So I like that. I think that's really interesting. That's probably why I like to go, like over here, I like to go to my local Starbucks, which is the scuzziest Starbucks I've ever been in. But I just like it because no one bothers me, and literally no one is looking at me. And I actually find, I'm also really nosy. But sometimes when you're struggling with a piece of fictional dialogue, I just find that I just need to eavesdrop on the next table.
Oh,
and just
yeah.
So I've done that a couple of times.
That's the thing, like, because I write about myself, right? Like there's no inspiration that can come from other people unless it's like, this person is fascinating to me or this person is bothering me. And then I can like channel that and write. But I imagine it is really good for fictional conversations. Okay, that's a perfect segue into my next question, which is, what is the difference for you between writing fiction and nonfiction? And like, do you have a preference between one and the other? Because I am working on some fiction right now, and a lot of it sounds like me, thinly veiled in the body of this character.
Well, first of all, I'm super excited about that, and please, will you send me it as soon as you're ready?
Yeah, I'll send you some chapters. I have some chapters if you want to read
literally
them.
Like email me as soon as this is finished, because I love your writing so much. I suppose, okay, so they're all versions of truth, because sometimes the bigger emotional truth appears in fiction. Whereas in nonfiction, in a way, so the nonfiction books I've written have come out of the podcast. So I wrote one called How to Fail: Everything I've Ever Learned from Things Going Wrong, which was sort of a memoir, but more of a manifesto. And then a shorter book called Failosophy, which is basically like my philosophy of failure. And I find those books much more straightforward to write because I don't have to invent an entire world. And all the research I do is basically listen to my own podcast and know myself as a person. So it's like so much more straightforward. And because I've had, I guess it's around 20 years now as a jobbing print journalist, I kind of know how to do that and I know how to structure things. But on the flip side, if I am poring over parts of my life that have caused me pain when I was living through them, which, you know, you do so brilliantly, and I wonder what it takes out of you, like that can be emotional, but not in a bad way. It just requires kind of emotional energy. And sometimes it can be incredibly cathartic. In fact, most of the time it can be, because I realize that I make sense of the world through words, writing them and reading them. And with fiction, there's a greater sense of liberation for me because I am inventing everything. But that's not to say that there aren't aspects of myself and my lived experience that go into every single character and every single situation, because that absolutely happens. That's not to say it's autobiographical. It's just that the stuff of life is in there. And I think if I had to choose one, I wouldn't want to, but if I had to choose one, I think I would choose fiction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I understand that. I think for me, writing about things that are painful, if I can get some distance from them, I feel like I can write about anything.
Yes.
Like
Totally.
as myself, like I don't have to work it out in a fictional way, because like if it was 5 years ago or, you know, 10 years ago, things that happened last week, so I have a little harder time, you know, like having the perspective and the ability to to really like get down in there. But like with the passage of time, I'm like, I can write about anything, and I feel like I can make anything funny, which is my way of sort of figuring things out. Is like, if I can find the joke, right? Like there's always, you know, even if you have to dig to the bottom of the painful thing, there's always something that I can like latch onto and make comedic. And you know what? And the things that I can't do that, I'm like, it's not time yet. I
love that.
I am working on a new book of essays now that is overdue. And one of the things that I wrote about this like aspect of my mom's death that I hadn't written about before. She said something really fucked up to me, like right before she died, and I had not written about it. And then I was like working on this other thing, and I'm like, you know, I'm going to put that in there because it doesn't feel so bad anymore, because it's been 25 years. But like 10 years ago, I don't know that I could have done it. But now I'm like, okay, this is funny now.
Yeah, I think that is such a beautifully profound thing to share. And I think it's absolutely the same with me. Sometimes something really difficult will happen in my life, and my immediate impulse is, I need to write this and I need to share it. But I know that it's not an impulse I should act on, because I know that that's not going to serve me. And you're right. I need to leave a passage of time. And like you, there are some things I have never written about, and I never will write about until the person involved are all dead. So that will then free me. But yes, I completely agree with you. And I feel the same about failure, actually, that some failures are more easily assimilated and more easily copable with than others. And other failures, you might live with them for the rest of your lives, and they might cause you sadness the rest of your life. But I truly believe that you can be at peace with that sadness if you choose to be. And I think that that's just a really important thing for you to have shared. So thank you.
Oh, please don't thank me. Thank you. How did you get to, I mean, this is going to sound so gross and I don't know how to put it, but except this gross way. So like everyone like has to have a brand now, right? Which is like disgusting. And unfortunately for me, the brand I've chosen is like, you know, poop and pee or like general sort of like body decay. How did you decide that like failure was it? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I do.
When you were picking your lanes, how did you know that like this is a thing? Because it's so universal, but it's also so like nobody wants to talk about
Yeah.
nobody wants to talk about it. So how did you decide that that's what you wanted to do?
Well, I didn't, is the short answer. I think failure chose me. So I mentioned earlier that I've had 20 years of being predominantly a Sunday newspaper journalist as my day job. And for many of those years, I was sent to interview celebrities who wanted to promote something, who had a film they were going to talk about, who'd just been pictured on the red carpet. And generally speaking, those celebrities would talk very positively about their success stories. And I always found that the most meaningful interactions in those interviews was when I was able to scratch beneath the surface and ask them something that was human. And quite often those moments were about the things that had gone wrong in their lives. And then when it came to write up the piece, I would be under pressure from my editor to leave those bits out. And it really frustrated me. And so I wanted to do like interviews that felt more real. And then my own personal life imploded. And my 30s were a decade of intense transition where it was the beginning of my trying and failing to have babies of my own. I got married to the wrong person and then divorced. Then another long-term relationship ended. And I found myself at the age of 39, single, without children, without the things that I thought I was going to have in my life. And I felt like a failure. And I felt a great deal of shame around that. And I wanted to have conversations with other people who could help me through, who might also have experienced failure and who had survived it and who could teach me how to be. And so those two things came together and I decided to launch a podcast. And it's been a really extraordinary thing. It's changed my life in so many ways for the better. And I now fully embrace the fact that my life didn't turn out according to plan. Thank goodness, because it's actually a really boring plan. And most of it was informed by 1980s rom-coms, which like are great movies, but I don't want to live my life as Melanie Griffith in Working Girl. You know?
Yeah.
And so I'm on the other side of that now, but I'm so passionate because I realized that as soon as I started having these conversations about failure, my shame disappeared. And I realized that it was a shortcut to a really deep and meaningful connection with the people that I was talking to. And so then I just became addicted to it. And it turned out that a lot of other people were yearning for those conversations too. And that's why it's just carried on and on and on.
One thing that I have found through my own work, a lot of times people are like, oh, how can you be so open? And in the beginning, it's like a little scary, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah. I have been met with so many people who are like, oh my, I mean, you would believe like how many people are just like, I have horrible diarrhea too. And I'm like, let's talk about it. Like people are so grateful that other people talk about their things. And that is like incredibly freeing to me to like hear other people like share their stuff. And in sharing my own things, I've had people come to me and be like, listen, I can't like get on the news and talk about this horrible thing that happened to me, but I do appreciate, it does make me feel seen to hear you talk about your experience. And that kind of connection is, I mean, it creates intimacy with an audience that is sometimes a little weird, right? Because people, and you especially, like I listen to your voice every week. It's like, oh no, I know her, right? Like this is my friend. And so like, that's a little tricky sometimes where I feel like I really know people that I don't actually know. And it also happens to me. But I think the positives outweigh the negatives. Like just when someone shares something with you, it feels like such a privilege that they trust you with their thing. And I'm like happy to have opened that door, even if it means like I have to feel a little humiliated. Like people will quote things I've said back to me and I'm like, oh, I shared that. And then it's like, whatever. Okay, let's talk about it.
I could not agree more. And the thing is, Samantha, is that you do know me. I mean, I do feel deeply connected to you on so many like amazing levels. And I'm so appreciative for our friendship, which
me too.
Which started out from a position where I read your essays, then you came on my podcast. And so we both had like our masks down. And I related so deeply to you. You know, I know you're joking when you talk about like how much you write about diarrhea, because you also write about just the human condition.
I do write about other things.
You write brilliantly about introversion and that thing of like falling in platonic love with someone, but then just like not being able to communicate with them. And I was like, oh my gosh, I found my spirit animal, because I feel exactly the same. And actually people who listen to my podcast do know me, because I finally got to the stage in my life where I feel I can be my authentic self in every part of it. And it took me years to get to that point. And just to your point about opening up about things that it can be quite hard to begin with. When I started opening up about fertility and miscarriage, all of these things that I'd experienced, it turned out that a very, very personal experience had far more universal resonance than I could ever have imagined. And in turn, I felt so seen by those women and men who'd been through similar experiences. And it's partly why there is, Magpie, there is a fertility theme running through it. And it's partly because I had never read it in a novel in the way that I would have liked to have read it myself when I was going through it. And like you, I feel like our writing is about endeavoring to make the unseen people seen.
Yeah. While I was reading Magpie, it's good, let's talk about it. Because I know you, I was like, oh man, I wonder if this was tough to write, because while it is like a spooky, creepy, I don't want to call it a thriller.
Thank you.
When you think thriller, you think like, like a detective chasing someone, but it is like an unsettling, what do we call it? Mystery? It's not really a mystery.
I've coined a term which is a compeller. It's like compelling, but it's not a thriller, because there are no dead bodies and there isn't a criminal detective. Yeah.
While I was reading it, I was like, okay, I see. I love the fertility theme. And then I immediately started to worry about you, because I know you, and I was like, oh, was this hard for her to do? Was it hard to project this onto a fictional character?
It wasn't hard in the sense that it wasn't difficult. It actually, like, those scenes came most naturally to me because I had lived so many of them. And so I knew what I wanted to write, and it flowed really easily. It was emotional, and it goes back to that thing I was saying earlier. Like, it definitely required emotional energy, but it felt deeply necessary. And so it wasn't re-traumatizing in any way. And I think Magpie was written in a curious set of circumstances, in that I had written about 15,000 words of the novel before the first national lockdown in the UK. And I was at that stage of novel writing where I was like, this is the worst piece of rubbish that has ever been committed to the screen, and I hate myself. So I was at that stage, and then coronavirus hit. And then, as you know, I like to write in coffee shops. So that was denied to me. And so I had 6 weeks of just not being able to write. And during that time, I found out I was pregnant, and very sadly, we miscarried 8 weeks along. And the rest of Magpie was written after all of that happened. And there was definitely somewhere that I needed to put that pain. And I think a lot of it went into Magpie and went into making something a physical object that could stand as testament to that time, because otherwise there would be absence. And it was really important to me that I had a testament of it. So I thank you for the question, because I really value being able to talk about these things. And I have to say, like, I hope that, I'm making it sound really grim.
Yeah, should we tell people like what it's?
Did you think it was funny?
The quick spoiler-free version of what it's about. Yes, I thought it was funny.
Okay. That's what I want on the blurb. That's what I want on the funny Samantha.
It's funny.
Irby.
It was like creepy. I had the whole part one. I had this sense of dread. Okay, let me tell you this. So I always call myself dumb, and like I mean it. But so when I read a thing with a twist, right? I never, or a movie, nothing. Like I was the person at the movie The Sixth Sense who did not get the twist.
I either.
At the okay, right? So the end
when it was revealed. When it was revealed, I understood it.
When it was revealed, I was like, oh my God. And my friend was sitting next to me in the theater and was like, oh my God, you're so fucking stupid. So I don't get it in movies. When I read Gone Girl, right? When the twist is revealed, I like dropped the book. I was like so shocked. Okay, so now I'm like fully prepared for all books to have twists. So I was like, there's gonna be a twist in this. I thought I knew. No spoilers. I will not ruin it for anyone. But I was so confident that I knew what was going on. I was like, she thinks she's slick, but I see what this is. And then part two started, and I was like, God damn, I did not. This isn't what I saw. So congratulations on fooling me, although I know I'm a moron, so I'm
just saying.
Somebody might read it and be like on page 2, know what's happening, but I didn't. So thank you for fooling me.
Oh my gosh, thank you for allowing yourself to be fooled, because the people who go on Amazon, there's one person on Amazon who went on recently, was like, I don't normally read reviews, but this one happened to like.
Why are you reading reviews?
No, I don't. I normally don't. But what was it? I'd gone on to, I don't know, it was something boring. I'd gone on to check my ranking, and a review flashed up, and it was 1 star, and it was like the title was "Self-Indulgent Nonsense." And basically, this woman, I then went into a rabbit hole Google, and she basically given 1-star reviews to every single book she'd ever written, which made me read, which made me feel better. But she gave away, she was like, it's such an obvious plot twist. And she gave it away in the actual Amazon review, which really annoyed me. But those people frustrate me. So therefore, I am so grateful that you didn't spot it. And can I just say that you've cited the 2 greatest twists of all time in culture, in my opinion, which like The Sixth Sense and Gone Girl, neither of which I got. And I actually, unlike you, I pride myself on being able to spot a twist a mile off. So ambition with Magpie was to write a twist that even someone who normally could spot them couldn't get it. And I'm therefore really grateful that you didn't. And
I did not.
Okay.
I will text you later what I thought what I thought was happening. And then when it didn't happen, I was like, all right. Okay. I wrote down so much shit.
Do you want me to give you the spoiler-free pitch? Just like the little
tell everyone,
summary?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Just because I've had to do this a lot, so I like to practice it any given occasion. So the book opens with Marisa. She's in her late 20s, and she's been through all the dispiriting online dating apps, and she thinks she's finally found a partner who ticks every single one of her boxes, and his name is Jake. And he seems really stable. He seems to come from a nice family. He's got a decent job. They move in together quite quickly, and they start trying for a family together quite quickly. At which stage the reader hopefully thinks, oh, that's all moving a bit fast. And then it turns out that Jake's job isn't actually going that well, and they have to take in a lodger to help make ends meet. And the lodger's called Kate, and Marisa is very suspicious of her from the beginning, because Kate takes an inordinate amount of borderline obsessive interest in Jake and Marissa's private life, and just seems to know a lot about Jake. And so Marisa becomes, she's in the early stages of a pregnancy, and those pregnancy hormones are mixing in with her obsessive interest in the lodger, and it all gets a bit sinister, and then something happens which pulls the rug hopefully from under everyone. And within that, I explore the themes of fertility and mental health and sisterhood, and also what happens when you think life seems perfect in this Instagram age, but actually it's anything but. That's it.
Oh, that's an incredible synopsis. And you don't give anything away. I can't describe, if I have to describe something, I'm like a kid where I'm like, okay, well, first she goes here. Then she goes, it takes like you could read the book in the time that it takes me to explain it. One of the things about Marisa that really like snatched me from the beginning is her self-consciousness and self-awareness is so well written, that especially like when she's describing how she dates and her experiences with men, I was like, it like made me like, oh my God, like I felt like, like you had like tapped into my brain a little bit. I was like, oh no, this feels so uncomfortably close to some of the ways that I feel. And I just wondered, like, do you write from like when you're, especially like your descriptions of feelings, her feelings, especially in the first part, are so vivid. Do you tap into your own well of feelings, or are you just very good at like knowing how other people think?
I think I definitely tap into my own well first, and a lot of her like online dating experiences were were anecdotes gleaned from my own slutty past.
I love it.
But I think I do think I find it, for whatever reason, fairly easy to imagine myself into someone else's skin. And I suppose it's through years and years of interviewing. I have to get used to listening to what someone's saying, but also listening to what they're not saying, which is often the most telling part, and leaving space for that to develop. And with Marisa, I feel, she's young, she's much younger than I am, and she grew up in a digital age. And so a lot of who she is about the kind of personal curation of self to the outside world. And it's certainly no coincidence that the job that I gave her is, she's an artist, but she makes money by painting fairy tales, updated modern fairy tales for middle-class parents who want their children to feature in the fairy tale. So the parent will send a photo and she will create fairy tales around this toddler and personalized fairy tales, but her business is called Telling Tales. And Marisa does tell tales about herself and who she is. And actually, we discover through the course of the novel that she had a really troubled childhood, which explains why she wants to craft this seemingly perfect life for herself.
Yeah, so good. I wanted to I don't know why I wrote this down, but I wanted to tell you that I too took a prenatal yoga class without being pregnant.
Oh my gosh.
But only because
everything.
Only because I saw an ad for it in a coffee shop, and I thought, it was like years and years ago, and I was like, oh, I mean, this is offensive, so please, pregnant or past pregnant people, don't get mad at me. But I was like, can't be that hard if pregnant people are doing it. Terrible, right? And it was the hardest shit I ever did in my fucking life. I had to like leave halfway through because I was like,
wait, did they ask
that lady's
you
9 months pregnant and she's like doing a back bend. I gotta get the fuck out of here and go lie down.
So did they ask you like how pregnant you were at the beginning, and did you lie?
No, I mean, I sort of always look a little bit pregnant, so
We all do.
no one asked. I walked in and they were like, like, get a mat. So when Marisa does that, I was like, oh, I feel you.
Yeah, so Marissa's trying to get pregnant, and she's read somewhere, or someone's told her, that one of the good things that you can do is go to a pregnancy yoga class and just be surrounded by magical pregnancy hormones, and that will open up some chakra. So that's what she does.
I thought for sure, I was like, oh, I'm going to get my period in the middle of this. And then like the jig will be up and they're going to beat me to death for interloping in their class. Okay, so I have a...
Please write a TV scene. Please write that into a script. That's so good.
I will. I'm gonna give it to Carrie Bradshaw. I'm gonna have her take a pregnant lady.
Oh my gosh, yes.
A pregnant lady class.
Oh, she's off Peloton.
Oh God, I can't even say the word Peloton anymore. So I want to know, like, with a book like this, it's not a thriller, a compella, is that what you called it? Okay.
Yes.
Do you decide on the ending first and work your way backward, or I'm like clearly obsessed with twists and turns and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
How do you format it? Like, did you know where you wanted to go, or do you just like write until you get there?
So generally speaking, I don't like to know where I'm going in fiction. In all other respects, in real life, I always like to know where I'm going. But with fiction, it's more important for me to understand my characters first and to start writing to get into their voices and into their heads, and then to see what happens as a result of that. So my plot is always informed by character. But with Magpie, I knew the twist before I started. So because, as you've heard, Magpie deals with quite a lot of knotty and deep and complex themes, I knew that I wanted to sweeten the pill somewhat and to make it a gripping read, to make it accessible for someone who might not normally pick up a book on fertility or mental health. And so I had the idea for a twist, and I just find twists so satisfying as a consumer of culture. I just absolutely love them. And so I had the twist, and that was sort of all I had. I knew where it would come in the book, and I knew the structure more or less, but I didn't know how it would end. And actually, originally, Magpie had a different ending that was darker than the one that it now has.
Ooh.
Not giving too much away, but I made that decision quite deliberately, because in a lot of conventional thrillers, I feel that women are pitted against each other, and that often women end up dead in ditches. And I knew that I didn't want that to happen. And I also knew that I didn't want to stigmatize mental health. And so talking in quite vague terms, that there's a reason the ending is the way it is. And I think it comes from the fact that I am a feminist, and a lot of my writing, I don't write because I want to create a feminist political tract, but it's obviously informed by my worldview. So there was a deliberate decision there. But no, I actually wrote a different ending first. And I didn't know a lot of things. Like, there's a monstrous mother-in-law character called Annabelle, who's Jake's mother. And I didn't really know she was going to exist until she sort of appeared on the page.
I did write down that you got married recently, and I wanted to ask how your mother-in-law is, because I was reading that like, is this revenge on Elizabeth's mother-in-law, or
no,
is this a wholly fictional character?
So my mother-in-law now is absolutely gorgeous, so warm and lovely. She's Polish. She could not be more different from Annabelle. She's sort of short and just so warm and welcoming. I have known women in the past like Annabelle, definitely. And I think she exists as she's a construct of the British class system. She's someone who is upper middle class, who you would describe her as, who's had quite a repressed emotional upbringing, and therefore doesn't know how to relate to her own children. Definitely,
she's so well drawn on the page that you like feel a chill coming from the book.
Oh, that makes me so happy.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I don't like her.
Yes.
Wait, I'm going to click on the questions,
click on the questions
so that we can do some of these. 2. Okay. Lauren wants to know. Also, you guys can add questions. Lauren wants to know, are you as big a fan of the Below Deck franchise as your characters are?
Oh, Lauren, thank you so much for asking this, because this is going to be our segue, Samantha,
Yes.
into a whole Bravo sidebar here. I am a bigger fan of Below Deck than my characters are. I do pay tribute to Below Deck in Magpie, and I have watched every single season from the beginning, every single franchise, like Sailing Yacht, Below Deck Med. There's a new one apparently, Below Deck Adventure, coming out. Not only that, I've got my husband who was a diehard anti-reality TV fanatic. I've got him into Below Deck to such an extent that for his birthday a couple of years ago, I got him a cameo from Captain Lee. And it was 5 minutes of just epically beautiful, almost Shakespearean profundity from Captain Lee, directed to Justin, my husband, that moved us both to tears. I mean, it was so beautiful. So I love Below Deck to distraction, and I love all the Real Housewives. And now, Samantha, tell me, do you love Below Deck as much as the Real Housewives?
I do not watch any of the Below Decks. I am not a boat guy. Like, I can't not think of drowning or being sick when seeing those. I just can't separate it. So I have not watched any Below Deck. You are so passionate about it that maybe I will start, especially because I just started paying for Peacock to watch some other thing. So now I have access to all of the Bravo shows. So maybe for you, I will watch it. But I am a Housewives fan down to the ground. The question I wrote for you is, what is your favorite franchise? And which is your favorite housewife? And they don't have to be from the same show. I'll answer it too.
Okay, good. Okay. So my favorite franchise, it's so tricky because the last year, it feels like a lot of franchises have done a pivot. So until this last season, my favorite franchise was New York.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I actually rewatched the whole thing from the beginning during lockdown. That was my project, as well as growing out my eyebrows. That was my lockdown project. So New York is my favorite franchise. But I have to say, I have loved the first episode of the new season of the first 2 of the Real Housewives of Atlanta. And that would be my second favorite. And I think this season, I love that they brought back Sheree. I think she's adding a whole load of heart and joggers to it.
People who don't watch this shit are like, get back to books.
I'm sorry.
No.
And I think my favorite housewife of all time, and I know she's controversial. But I love Bethany Frankel.
Oh, that's okay. I thought you were gonna say Ramona. I was gonna fucking throw my computer out.
Never Ramona. Either Bethany Frankel or Kenya Moore.
Okay, I am a Potomac person.
Potomac also.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
Atlanta, number 2. Atlanta would be number 1, except they've had some seasons that weren't great.
Yeah.
And my all-time favorite housewife is Luann, the Countess.
I mean, that is a great call, because Luann, like, there is a Luann for every season. Like, any life phase that you're going through, there is a Luann for, which I think is an amazing quality.
Yes. Yeah, she really is. I mean, she's such a mix of the high and the low, right? Like, she's a countess and she's rich, but she's also like falling out of cars drunk. And I can relate, well, not to the countess part, but certainly to the like falling all over yourself and looking like a fucking asshole part. Okay, I'm going back to the smart questions from.
Wait, but just quickly, Potomac.
Yeah, no, please.
I do, yeah. So have you seen that Ashley Darby, thank goodness, has split up from her kangaroo steak husband? I'm so relieved for her.
It is weird to watch. My dad was a real like asshole, and I like to watch a lot of sports. I don't know if we've ever talked about that, but one of the things my dad used to say is like, I'm not going to sit around watching other people make money. And I'm like, well, okay, dude. So I sort of feel like that about the Housewives in that I'm like, I shouldn't be worrying about these millionaires, but Ashley was truly like past couple of seasons, I was like, does she have like real friends who are taking care of her for real? I am feeling worried for this person and her babies. So I'm very happy that they are splitting.
Yeah.
Although I did love the drama that he brought. I mean,
he'll still be bringing, he's still going to bring the drama. He'll still turn up at all the parties just to try and like kiss Juan on the lips.
Yeah. I mean, that would be his biggest dream come true.
Yeah.
If this means he gets to like be with men now, then great.
Yeah.
Make him a housewife too with his new husband. I love it. Okay. Smart question from someone watching. Ash wants to know, how do you balance tension and foreshadowing?
That is such a great question. How do I do it? Well, it's also a complimentary question because you assume that I can do it. I think having an idea where your characters are going to end up, even if you don't know the full nuance of how exactly that's going to work out, is helpful. Having some sort of like end point in mind, and then understanding that you need to pace the events accordingly. So you've got a kind of mental roadmap of where you need to get to. And then it's a question of like, one of the things that I like to do, and I think it comes from my journalistic training, is that I always leave every chapter on a slightly uncertain or compelling or sinister note, so that I hope you are then drawn forwards into the next chapter. And so it feels like you're moving quite quickly. But the other thing that does is allow for a kind of regular rhythm, like a regular heartbeat of something not quite right. And like a sort of regular heartbeat of suspense will come at the end of every chapter. And so it's almost like sheet music, I guess, how I'm describing it, is that I kind of know structurally like where that beat needs to come, and it's generally at the end of the chapter. So I think that helps. And then I think the other thing that I'm always very aware of now when writing fiction, and it's taken me quite a long time to realize this, is that what people don't say is as important as what they do say. And also, they don't always say what they mean. Now, that sounds so obvious and basic if you're talking about people in real life. But quite often when it comes to writing a fictional character, as a novelist, you think, well, they have to say what they mean. When you're writing dialogue, you're like, oh, well, they would say yes, because that's what's happening. So it's a question of reminding yourself that you can also lay misleading clues in the dialogue and also in what you leave out of the dialogue. So the gap between who people are and who they say they are is also a really good way of ramping up tension and suggesting foreshadowing. I think that's
such a good answer. You are too good at this. I would have been like, oh, I don't know.
How do you do it in a script? Scripts are so hard.
Scripts are hard, except that they are pretty well outlined before you have to write one, right? So like the general structure of the episode is all there. And sometimes, like, depending on the show, you get like super detailed, almost like the outline has like bits of dialogue and jokes that you need to include. So it's just a matter of saying, like interior, so-and-so day, and then you sort of like describe the scene and you kind of have the words already there for you, and you can take liberties and stuff. I've had some scripts that I've written that had less less outline beforehand, and then I just sort of, there's always a page limit, which I think for me in my own work, I'm like, I know the ending when I start, right? Like I always write to a place. I'm like, okay, this is going to end with this time that this thing happened to me, and I can take whatever route I want to get there, but it ends up there. With a script, you sort of have a general idea. We're going to start here, we're going to end here. And if it's a half-hour show, you know that your script needs to be around like 33 pages. So then I will write to fill up the space, but then it's like, if I'm on page 29 and I have 2 more scenes to write, then I got to find some real estate somewhere and like go back and make things shorter, or figure out, well, this scene doesn't have to be this long, or this scene could be longer. So it's a little, that all of the tension and the, you know, what's going to happen is pretty laid out before you start. And then depending on like what your showrunner is like, you can either take your own path to get there, or it's like, well, she said this after this after this after this, so that's
so interesting, that idea of like a baked in length. I wonder if like you could write, or I could write a novel like that and just say to myself, I'm going to write this number of words and it has to have happened by then, because actually maybe that would be a really interesting discipline.
Yeah, I have not tried it with my own stuff because I am a very self-indulgent writer, and some things lots of things could be shorter, but with the scripts, it's really handy.
I want your writing to be longer all the time.
Well, I wrote this, I can't even call it an essay. So I wrote a pilot. I had a 7-year pilot process for turning my book Meaty into a show. And we made a pilot, and the pilot failed. Pilots often fail. So I wrote about it for this new book that's coming out. And I mean, the essay is like, I can't even call it an essay. It's like 15,000 words. But they feel necessary. And I think when people read it, you'll see like why it's that long. It's sort of structured like a script, with like insight from me on the process of getting the show made, but telling you what would happen in the show if you could watch it. So generally, I'm pretty indulgent with that. I was very indulgent, but with scripts, they're like, HBO is giving us 33 minutes, so your fucking script and they say like a minute a page, so your script needs to be 33 pages. It's actually, I'm not a like rule. I don't need rules, but I appreciate them, and it sometimes feels good to like write in a structured way. I mean, I wouldn't choose it all the time. I think it feels good because in every other part of my writing, I just do what I want. And if I'm writing 10,000 words about, going to the bathroom, what are you going to do? But in TV, it's nice to have that structure. We have one more question. This is from Ashley. How do both of you motivate yourselves to write when you're not feeling it and have a deadline?
Well, Ashley, great question. I definitely am used to writing to deadline because I was a journalist. So that really helped, because journalism taught me that writing is a craft as well as an art. Like, you can't one day just build a beautiful building. You have to learn how to lay the bricks. And journalism was like laying the bricks. And with journalism, if I didn't meet the deadline, there'd be a blank page in the newspaper and I'd be fired. And so that was great motivation. But with books, I mean, I think with books, the the great liberty of writing a book is that you can go back and re-edit it yourself. And so what I do is I have a deal with myself that whenever I open my laptop, I'm going to write 1,000 words, and as much as possible, I'm going to suspend that inner critic, that internal judgment that is telling me that they're the worst words in the world.
Teach me how to do that.
Well, I can't always do it, but the trick for me is that I know when I next open up my laptop, I can go back and edit those because no one's seen them yet. And that's really helpful because when you have words on a page, that's when a book starts to exist. And you can go back and re-edit them. So I think that's how I get over the deadline fear, is like, I can always change this, and it doesn't have to be the most perfect as I'm writing it because I can go back and re-edit it. So I think, does that make sense? Does that help me with deadlines? I think, I don't know, I'm a very I wish I were more rebellious, but I'm very rule observant, and the idea of missing a deadline makes me really fearful. And so I just consistently try and please other people at the detriment of my own creativity. So I do that.
That's amazing. I do not. I blew by a deadline, many deadlines. I think I have to get to the point where they're like, I got the call a couple weeks ago. It's like,
yeah,
you're fucking up. You're going to fuck up your release date. And I'm like, oh, okay. But I can't stand the idea of like closing my laptop when something is not good. Don't, I'm like, it has to be perfect when I write it. And I'm not really like a perfectionist. I don't do anything perfectly, but I am like humiliated to get things back that need a ton of work. Like it's sort of like teacher's pet-ish, where I want my editor to be like, this is great. No notes. They never say no notes, but I would like fewer notes. And so I get caught up in the like, this has to be good. This has to be good. This has to be good. And to my own detriment, although I have gotten most of my book turned in, so I feel pretty good, but I still am over my deadline.
The other thing is like, it's really good hearing from different people how they cope with deadlines, because what I learned from you is actually the world doesn't implode if you need a deadline extension.
Yeah.
And I think another thing genuinely that I employ is the kind of treat economy, where if I have hit my deadline and I have hit the number of words that I was required to write, then I'm going to binge watch Real Housewives of Atlanta, or I'm going to book myself a massage. I'm quite a sort of, in that respect, I'm quite a basic human being. I think that those like having rewards built into your creativity is a really, really key for me.
See, my fatal flaw is that I'll just give myself the reward no matter what. I'm like, you get a reward for writing half a page. Here you go. Take 2 weeks off. And like, that's a problem. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more thing. My favorite question to ask people. First, an admission that to get psyched up for this, I was like, I got to watch something British. So I started watching Anatomy of a Scandal on Netflix.
Yes.
With Sienna Miller and Michelle Dockery. I don't know what that lady's name is, but it's pretty good. I was like, I'm getting ready to talk to Elizabeth. I'm gonna watch some British stuff. What are you watching on TV right now? I know this is a book talk, but
I love this question. Okay. It's going to be so British. Well, other than all of the Real Housewives ofs, I watched two things. Today I watched The Eyes of Tammy Faye, about Tammy Faye Baker, the televangelist, as played by Jessica Chastain, and won her an Oscar, and it was amazing. We saw
that in the theater. I loved it.
I thought it was great. And I didn't even really know who Tammy Faye was coming from a British perspective. But then I spent a healthy amount of my Sunday afternoon YouTubing videos of her. And then the other two things that I've been watching, there's an amazing documentary on the BBC at the moment with a friend of mine, Andy Oliver. I also present a books program, and Andy Oliver is the other presenter. And she and her daughter, Makita, went to the Caribbean, which is where Andy's family are all from, to just understand their heritage. And there was this incredibly moving scene where they do a DNA test, and Andy discovers that she's 38% Nigerian, and she had never known that. And the reason she'd never known it is because her ancestors were slaves who had been transported from Nigeria to Antigua. And she just was like, well, I'm Antiguan. And that was as far as it went. And it was this really like moving, unbelievable realization for her of what her family had been through for her to exist. So that was amazing. And then I was also watching this trashy show on Netflix called, and I don't know if it's available in America, called Inside Misguided. So Misguided is a super fast, trashy fashion brand here in the UK. Like, it's just a million times worse than ASOS. And it seems to be run almost exclusively by these really gobby, assertive, incredible women who just are all about 23, but just know their opinions on everything. And it's a documentary about them. So I've been watching that.
I don't know if it's available here, but I'm going to try to find it. I have a VPN. I probably shouldn't say that. The FBI is listening, but
what have you been watching? What have you been watching, my darling? You'll have better recommendations. And the Kardashians, the new one on Disney Plus.
See, I have not watched that. I am watching Ozark, the final episodes of Ozark on Netflix. We are big Jason Bateman fans in this house. And Atlanta. I don't know. Do you get FX shows? Do you have Hulu in England?
No.
I don't know anything. Okay.
Annoyingly, we don't, but we sometimes get it on other platforms. So the Kardashians, for instance, is on Disney Plus, and The Dropout, which I also loved, was on Disney Plus.
I loved The Dropout. I loved it. Good. You know what else I just watched, and it was like deeply unsettling? We Crashed.
Oh, you reminded me I wanted to watch that. Yes.
Jared Leto was like distracting with his accent, but it was good. It was good. And it's worth it for Anne Hathaway. Anne Hathaway is really, really doing it in that show. So I watched that. I watched The Dropout. I'm about to watch that Candy, that Jessica Biel, like I Killed My Neighbor.
I don't think I get that.
Damn. Well, I'll give you my VPN and you can.
Thank you so much.
I don't even know if you can transfer a VPN. Okay, do you have anything else that you would like to say about the book, about TV, about anything?
I mean, so much, but it's midnight here and I have to go to bed. Like, I could honestly talk through the night to you. The thing that I want to say is the hugest thank you to you, Sam, because every time I have any communication with you of any description, whether it's reading your books or talking to you or WhatsApping you, I leave feeling so much better about the world, because you are such a force for good and for brilliance and for hilarity. And I feel so lucky that I met you, let alone that you agreed to do this. And I'm so grateful to you. So thank you. I've loved every single second.
You're welcome. I'm deeply uncomfortable, and I'm going to flip this and say that you and your podcast, your books, everything about you, your friendship are so important to me. I'm so proud of you. I can't wait for everyone to read all of your stuff, listen to your lovely voice. I almost don't really know what TV presenter means, but I hope that people are. It's like host, right? I was like, host. Presenter. What? I want everyone to watch everything you do and listen to everything you do, because you are magical.
Oh, thank you, my darling. This has been so nice. And thank you all for coming. I also love LA and I want to move there someday.
Oh, yeah. If you move to LA, I won't move there, but I will visit you a lot.
Okay, I'll come to Kalamazoo or wherever you.
Oh, well, I mean, I'll pay for it because truly, you're going to be disappointed once you No, I have to bring you here. You can't come here on your own. Okay. Sorry. We can have this conversation in private later.
I don't want to end this. This has been great, you guys. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Samantha.
You're welcome.
This was a wonderful, wonderful event. Listening to you both talk about your writing and your craft, both of you, it was really inspiring and it was really fun and interesting. And I have a whole page of notes that y'all were saying. I'm like, oh, that's really good. Ooh, that's really good. And your answers, Elizabeth, to these questions, that the one about the foreshadowing, oh my gosh, that was brilliant. So this was just really awesome. And I hate to cut you off, but it's that time, and it's time to wrap. So thank you.
This was so fun. Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you
and
so
everybody
much.
out there, the audience, thank you all for joining us. This was really great. And anything before we go? Any last words?
Buy Elizabeth's books.
Here's
Bye,
the link.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, there's the link down below.
You can also go to booksoup.com and find probably more than just Magpie. I'm assuming the party would probably be there. Is that still
it is.
in circulation? And okay, yeah. And Samantha Irby, are your books over at BookSoup at all?
I think so, but skip them. It's okay. We're here about Elizabeth.
No,
we can sell my books. When I have another book come out, then we can talk about buying.
Okay, and then I'll interview you for then.
Listen,
that would be
I would die.
Oh my God, I'm there. Sign me up. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Have a wonderful afternoon.